Right, a massive welcome for the first time to Thomas Sheridan with History, Heretics and Hysteria. Thomas is an artist, researcher, public speaker and author of 4 books. His insightful website is all the W's, thomassheridanarts.com. Thomas highlights tonight good and evil. And we all know what those are, don't we? We're all clear on them. They need no explanation. No one else has had a hand in shaping our thoughts and feelings on these. We learnt these when we were young, maybe. But what if? Please welcome Thomas Sheridan.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks everybody for having me here. My name is Thomas Sheridan, and the world never made sense to me growing up. I couldn't understand why there was so many suffering in the world, and most people I met were normal, cordial, decent, well-behaved, and yet that did not reflect the reality of the world that was filled with wars, economic chaos, social, religious sectarianism, and other forms of human deprivation that seemed so unnecessary. I grew up on the north side of Dublin during the Troubles, and when I was 8 years old, 3 car bombs went off in the centre of Dublin, killing 30 people quite close to where I was, and it was the moment in my life where I became conscious. I was suddenly aware that I was a being, a living being at 8 years old, going on 9, and I couldn't understand why someone would do something like that. So anyway, I went through life, I played in bands, I ended up in New York playing in a rock band, having an amazing time. When that finished, I went to work on Wall Street as after I trained to be a graphic designer, and I worked mostly in Wall Street investment banks, including Goldman Sachs. And then suddenly the world started to make sense to me, because I was starting to encounter and meet people that seemed to have a very different value construct than the rest of us. They were very glib and they were very superficial. And through a series of happenstances, I encountered this one guy who one day explained to me that he'd been clinically diagnosed as a socially functioning psychopath. And I thought that was, Norman Bates' axe killer. And he says, no, it's not. It's just somebody who doesn't care about anything. And they see everybody and everything as an object and a target. And he was very candid about this. And he'd been clinically diagnosed following some events in his life that his parents forced him. He came from a rich family, so instead of going to jail in America, no, rich people don't go to jail, only poor people do. So he got some kind of diagnostic testing, and he scored the highest level of this thing called the psychopath, which basically meant he was a psychopath. What a psychopath is someone who has no conscience. They only see other people as objects. They have no remorse, and they see everything in life as a target or something to be used. That's it. It's a different way of living. Now, what I'm going to give to you tonight is an enormous subject. In fact, I would actually go as far and be bold to say that this is the subject. This is it. This is why we are seeking answers. It's because 1% of the population, and probably around 4% in the upper echelons of society, could be clinically diagnosed as psychopaths. And they're making it hell for the rest of the human race. And you have met them in your own life. If you're up to 30 years of age, you've definitely met one through your job or somewhere. You've encountered one. However, this is not a night about fear. This is a toolkit I'm presenting here. So this is, we must have maturity. And this is why I put up this slide next. Hellraiser, the movie Hellraiser, the Clive Barker film from the 1980s. And this is what we're going to do tonight. We're actually going to raise hell, bring it out of the shadow, bring it into the real world. And just like this film, that cube, it's opened by desire and not curiosity. And it's the desire that actually can cause how you react to something in a negative or a positive way. So What I'm going to say to you is what I'm going to hear tonight is going to frighten some of you. It's going to make you wonder if you are one, and if you wonder if you're one, the chances are you're not, because they don't self-reflect. It's like a robot. You're going to have recollections of people you met in your life, and it will suddenly go, that's what was going on. However, this is information that I believe everyone should be aware of, but nobody should dive into too deeply. It's not for everyone to go too deeply into it. Some people, they run away with themselves and they start thinking that everyone who annoys them in their lives or gives them a hard time becomes a psychopath. These people are unhealthy. So they're not even, actually, I'm very suspicious of people who are very quick to call everyone a psychopath, because they're either deflecting from themselves or they're hysterics. So remember, it's 1% of the population and they're not violent. But knowing this information can fill in very strange periods in your life where someone may have damaged you, a bully at work, or a bad relationship, or a crazy boss. Now, why am I interested in this? Well, because it helped me when I met this guy, I started to investigate this stuff. There was very little books around at the time, but I picked up bits and pieces here from medical journals, and it became kind of like a train spotter thing for me, because it was like anytime I heard anything in the New York Times about studies of the psychopathology, I would read through it and look through it, and it was very interesting. It just was so interesting to me. But also I couldn't understand how we didn't know about this. Why this was such a big deal, and yet we were never being told about it. And the reason it became self-evident is because our system is built on psychopathology. Now, why do we go into these things? This is like, well, I'm not one of these spiritual dudes who he thinks everything is going to be great and okay. I'm not saying that stuff isn't real, but the world is made up of black, white, good, evil, positive, negative, male, female. We live in a dualist universe, and we have to accept that there's a darkness in this world. There's a darkness in the human condition, and there's a darkness, a shadow in there. And by bringing that shadow to the surface, as Carl Jung said, we become enlightened. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is self-reflection.
So we bring the darkness, the shadow of mankind into the light, and therefore we understand who we are as a species, what we're subjected to, and things in our own lives we become aware of. We are able to scale them up to the big picture. If we know why a period in our life was a mess, or someone we encountered really damaged us, it allows us to scale the experience up to the top. I believe that the psychopathology issue is the one that we can use the most to sell the idea that this world is dysfunctional and run by maniacs to the major public. They're never going to believe in lizards. They're never going to believe in aliens. They're never going to believe in anything like that. But you can use their own science against them. You have something very powerful that they cannot deny. And that they will have to confront and deal with. Because this is all scientifically validated. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a spiritual aspect to this. In fact, there is on some levels. Depending what your idea of spirituality is, where it is, how human consciousness interacts with reality and so on. And all this stuff is valid in this stuff as well. This is such a huge thing. I've done 3 talks in Norway. They were 3 hours each. I've done 9 hours and I still haven't covered probably half of what this subject takes. It's huge. I had a hard time tonight trying to keep this under 100 slides. I'm going to explain what the psychopath is, how it functions, how it's spotted. That doesn't mean we go around going, oh, he's wrong. You don't do that. Because that's how witch hunts start, and that's what they use to get against us. They want us fighting amongst each other and being suspicious. And then I'm going to scale up to the greater level, the political, social, economic, and even spiritual level. I'm actually going to look through the history, hopefully we'll have time tonight, of evil, of good and evil, and where these ideas came from, and how we've been actually manipulated through such ideas. Okay, your grandmother used to say to you, oh, there's some good in every person. No, that's wrong. The psychopaths have no good in them. If they have good, it's just to manipulate and use people. It's a game they're playing. They don't have any good in them. They see everybody as a target and everybody as an object spoon, coat, CD player, wife. Bread, cheese, table, children. Human beings are just objects to them. Devices they can use. So they have no good in them. They're habitually predatorial and only view other people, families and organisations as objects for their own personal ends. They will undertake whatever forms of deception which may be required to achieve their aims, regardless of the consequences of others. They do not care about what happens to other people. Everything and everyone is a potential target to be manipulated and worked. Now, before we go further, this is not a witch hunt. I'm just giving you a toolkit, something you can actually go with. It doesn't mean we're going to start going around and looking for them and burning them and stuff like that, because that's what they would want. We're going to be much smarter than them. We're going to avoid them. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. So this is awareness and self-defense. Now, before, again, we have to be mature. There's a lot of hysterical types have suddenly got into this stuff, and they start seeing psychopaths everywhere, just like, you know, a plague-ravaged serf back in the Middle Ages saw witches everywhere. Stay away from these people, they're idiots. They're dangerous idiots. We must be mature, we must be adult about this. Most times, a creep is just a creep. We've all been obnoxious and bad at some point in our lives. We've all done things we're ashamed of. But the difference between a normal person, us and a psychopath, is we actually look back and say, I shouldn't have done that. You feel bad about it. Or you didn't deliberately do it, you didn't target that person deliberately. It may have been a result of immaturity, selfishness, your libido. It may have been a thing of peer pressure. It may have been a witch hunt. But you look back, you know, gang mobbing in a job where they all picked on someone, and years later you look back and say, well, we shouldn't have picked on that woman, she did nothing wrong, I was just going along with peer pressure. A psychopath wouldn't care, and they would live their whole lives like that. They would live their whole lives, everything is a target, everything is to be something to be used and manipulated. They would never have any self-reflection, no guilt, no nothing, no remorse. So a psychopath's a very specific individual. Their machinations are driven by the desire to control the perceptions. This is a word the term I'm going to be using a lot tonight, perceptions. In order to, the perceptions of others, in order to the targets to hand over their personal sovereignty and then teach the targets to destroy, deconstruct themselves from within. How familiar does that sound in the world that we live in? We are not a species we are a species who are demolishing ourselves from within, according to mandates, concepts, ideas, dogmas, methods and systems that have been handed to us. Here, destroy yourself. Here, punish yourself. They've made our psychology that of a flagellant in the Middle Ages whipping themselves in order to get into heaven. Our minds are now like this. When you watch the news, you're told what to think. You're told how to hate yourself because they're controlling what I call the lords of perceptions. They're controlling our perceptions by telling you how to feel about yourself as a human being. And that's why it's so difficult to wake other people up. Now, what is a psychopath? What's the clinical definition? Well, Herbie Cleckley, who wrote the classic book, the first one I ever read, The Mask of Sanity, back in 1947, he was a psychiatrist. He said, it's a perfect mimic of a normally functioning person, able to mask or disguise the fundamental lack of internal personality structure and internal chaos that results in repeatedly purposeful, destructive behavior. In other words, they invent personalities, they invent personas. They pretend to be somebody they're not in order to win your trust. Doesn't that sound like what you hear every time an election happens? And they're purposely destructible. They know exactly what they're doing. It's not an accident. It's not something that happens because they made a mistake. It happens because they did it deliberately. This internal chaos is then projected onto others at the social personal level in order to control their perceptions and thus create false realities within victims so as to manipulate them through dependency, confusion and fear. In other words, creating their order out of our chaos. You heard that one before? They cause chaos. They're the merchants of nonsense. In the workplace, in the governments, they create nonsense, they create confusion. And what that does is, in that confusion, you're so willing to find an answer. Just give me some peace, tell me what tax I have to pay. Tell me who I have to hate. Who do I vote for? Just give me some peace. Now, you're going to start thinking back at people you may have met in your life. Do not be diagnosing people just because you don't like them. Just think carefully. Be mature. The reveal is the point where you will know somebody who's probably a psychopath and they appear and you don't know where this new stranger came from. If you experience one of the following behaviours, there's 4 of them, not just these 2, and you have that all these things. You can't just do it on one thing. Invented personas to manipulate others. They'll invent a different personality for every person and place they interact with. They can leave one relationship and then you'll see them a few months later, they look like a different person. They'll have completely different interests and hobbies because they're manipulating the new person. Same with politicians. Invented personas. They change political parties across the time. In parliamentary democracies, you have crossing the floor. They give up on Labour and they go to Conservative. Vice versa. They're just cold-blooded, calculating business minds that are only interested in doing what it takes to get it. They pretend they're religious, they pretend they're pious. Oh, the New Age movement is filled with them. I'm so spiritual. Stab you in the back with a crystal. I've got a better term for them. Highly unreliable, broken promises. Psychopaths will make the most incredibly ambitious plans, including you as their right-hand man or woman, then on a whim, instantly discard those plans and move on some other crusade that excludes you. Targets often alter their own life plans to help the psychopath reach their imaginary goals, resulting in appalling financial, psychological, and financial chaos for the targets when the psychopath moves on. You are used like an object. The politician, when he will use people to get elected, as soon as he's elected, you don't matter. Vince Foster, he was an aide to Bill and Hillary Clinton. Literally within hours of the Clintons being elected, he was found dead in a park in Washington, D.C. with a suicide note saying that politicians can't be trusted. As soon as they get into power, they change to different people. Bill and Hillary. I don't know about Bill, but Hillary Clinton is an absolute. And that's what happened. She had no use for him anymore. He was disposable. And he killed himself. And they love when you kill yourself. That's what they're looking for. That's how they kill mostly. It's called murder by suicide. This idealization followed by cold rejection. At the height of the idealization, our psychopaths always idealize, oh, you're the most beautiful in the world. Oh, you're such a sexy guy. Oh, you're the best guitar player in the world. Oh, you're a brilliant artist. And as soon as it's no use to you anymore, you've gone. So the psychopath will show you obsessive love, care, and attention. However, once they feel where they have you or where they want you, or the relationship is ended, if you collapse in front of them on the street, they would simply step over you as if you never existed and continue on their way. Then they implement smear campaigns. So you look at the media, that's all the media is, smear campaigns. They attack people, and the smear campaign is designed to take your eye off the real ball. When psychopaths run a smear campaign, what they are doing is they're taking the deflection away from themselves. And it's happening right now in this country with all these old TV stars that are all being arrested. The reason for that is they're hoping the public will forget about the politicians who did much worse. That's what they're doing with that thing. It's a psychopathic smear campaign. I'm not saying those fellas are innocent, by the way. I'm just saying they're whipping up the hype through their trash media to get people all worried about, washed up stars from the 70s, so they're not looking at the ones who are currently in government. Becomes obsessed with a hobby-caused individual that's only doing this for show. And then loses interest instantly because it's just an interest to get. They want to target a woman who has a load of money, and she may be a born-again Christian, he'll pretend to be a born-again Christian. It's just a persona. It's just an act. Phony altruism. They pretend to be great charity workers, but it's to buy you. It's to buy your trust. This is why they have all these crazies at the top. All have these philanthropist organizations. Oh, they're great with the charity. Am I wonderful? I'm giving money to vaccines to Africa while I'm paying for bombs to be dropped on top of Afghanistan. Phony altruism. I surround myself with Bono and Bruce Springsteen and all these other gobshites, and they all, it doesn't mean I'm wonderful.